The unforgotten witty last words from the outlaws of Old West. Well, Billy the Kid got one of the most short-lived colorful life as an outlaw, which ended when he was only 21, as he got shot in the dark by Garrett. However, we also have Cherokee Bill, who was pushed into his death on gallows when he was just 20. Still, he was the outlaw who got to have the wittiest last words even before death. You're curious, right? So am I. Then let's find out the reason at the end of this video. But before that, let's hear the last words of the first outlaw on our list, Billy the Kid. Let's begin with the legendary and unforgettable outlaw that the lawman Pat Garrett kept an eye on. Kid was a skilled gunslinger who had gunned down 21 men at the young age of 21. He was the leader of the notorious Rustlers gang, who became an endless headache for cattle ranchers in New Mexico. Despite that, he was known by the townspeople for being humble and polite, but his enemies knew him as a deadly outlaw. However, his colorful life as an outlaw ended early. Before Garrett gunned him down in the Fort Summer, he said, "I'm not afraid to die like a man fighting, but I would not like to be killed like a dog unarmed." Thomas Black Jack Ketchum was infamous for his robberies and crimes. Alongside his gang members, they committed several crimes, and their latest attempt was their last. When Ketchum's gang tried to rob a train, he was shot by the conductor in the arm, knocking him off his horse. The next morning, he was found by the authorities beside the tracks, badly wounded. His arm was amputated, and while waiting for his trial, he was nursed back to health. Later on, he was sentenced to execution by hanging. His last words were, "Can't you hurry this up a bit? I hear they eat dinner in Hades at 12 sharp, and I don't aim to be late." Sam Bass was a notorious robber who mainly specialized in robbing stagecoaches and trains. With the mayhem they continued to spread, he and his gang became under Pinkerton's and the Texas Rangers' radar. That's why their last bank robbery failed when the authorities ambushed them, since one of his gang members actually betrayed them, as the person became an informant of the Texas Rangers captain John B. Jones. During the shootout, Bass was fatally wounded, and just before he succumbed to death, he uttered these words, "Let me go! The world is bobbing around me." Augustine Chacon. This fellow was very popular, and despite being an outlaw, he was still widely liked by many citizens. Well, maybe due to his Robin Hood-like personality, he had gained a huge crowd cheering for him. But Chacon was still a deadly outlaw who had killed 30 men in his outlaw career. That's why the Arizona Rangers captain, Burden C. Mossman, disguised as an outlaw and colluded with one of Chacon's gang members to betray him in exchange for a pardon and cash. Eventually, Chacon was arrested and was sentenced to death by hanging. And before he was hanged, he shook his followers' hands and bid them goodbye. With a smile, he uttered, "Too late now. Time to hang. Adios todos, amigos." Tom Horn. Well, he really had a variety of occupations, for he was an outlaw, scout, lawman, and even a notorious gun for hire. The number of men who fell under his hands as a hired gun was approximately 17. Also, he was known for being a sharpshooter who could hit his unsuspecting target from 200 yards away. However, later on, he was executed by hanging for allegedly killing a sheep rancher's 14-year-old child. His last words were, "Killing men is my specialty. I look at it as a business proposition, and I think I have a corner on the market." Wild Bill Longley. His story as an outlaw had all started when he accidentally killed his father's slave. Together with his cousin, Longley fled to southern Texas, where they spent the entire year doing all sorts of hideous crimes. He later disguised himself as a sharecropper, then ambushed and killed his childhood friend, Wilson Anderson, whom Longley's family blamed for a relative's death. However, The law caught up with him soon, and after his arrest, he was tried and was sentenced to be executed by hanging. Shortly before his death, many believe that he might have experienced a change of heart since he uttered these last words: "I deserve this fate. It is a debt I owe for my wild, reckless life. When it is paid, it will be all over. May God forgive me." James Brown Miller, or Deacon Jim, has earned his uncanny reputation as the deadliest outlaw and one of the most feared psychos of his time. Despite being a notorious hired gun and criminal, he continued his facade as a very religious and respectable minister. Well, at least on the outside. Thus they nicknamed him Deacon. Behind the scenes, he was a terrible person who would kill anyone as long as the price was right. And during his heyday, several lawyers with land claim cases, locals with existing feuds with some big associations, would just mysteriously disappear. He had a sophisticated way of dealing with his job and always managed to evade getting caught. But eventually his facade ended, and he was finally caught after failing for the first time in cleaning all the loose ends. When the mob heard the news, fearing that Miller would escape again, they forcibly hanged him together with his conspirators. Before dying, he said, "Let the record show I've killed 51 men. Let her rip." Henry Starr. He might be one of the prime examples of having his aspiration being deeply inspired by his family. Since Henry was a descendant of one of the West legendary outlaws, the infamous Belle Starr, aka the Queen of the Outlaws, he might be considered as the man who robbed more banks alone than anyone else in America, as he was on a hot trail with the law. Sadly, Henry's luck soon would run out, and he was captured by the authorities. Surprisingly, he was then released from prison after being paroled for his good conduct. However, he was only able to maintain that when he was inside. So, upon his release, he immediately returned to robbing banks. Later on, his series of successful heists was ended with a failure, and he was shot in the back. His last words were, "I love it. It is wild with adventure." Calamity Jane. Who would not remember the woman who made a name for herself with her calamity-like presence? It was believed that she was about as ill-behaved as any male outlaw during her time. She was quite notorious for being a heavy drinker, her fiery temper, and was fond of wearing men's clothing. Despite that, she was well remembered also as a selfless person for nursing the sick people without worry of getting infected herself when smallpox hit Deadwood, South Dakota. Later on, she would meet a sad and miserable end as her alcoholism fully took over her life. And shortly before her death, she said, "Leave me alone and let me go to hell on my own route." Levi Boone Helm. Unlike everyone else, this person was oddly infamous as the Kentucky Cannibal. Despite this, Helm started normal, just like a typical frontier person. Well, aside from being too violent, he was even confined inside an asylum. But shortly, he managed to escape and continued his notoriety as a serial killer and cannibal. It was only after teaming up with the notorious Henry Plummer's gang that he was again captured. During the trial, Helm even kissed a Bible and then accused his close friend and fellow gang member of crimes he had committed. Of course, that didn't work, and they were sentenced to be hanged in front of a huge crowd of 6,000. After seeing his friend hanged, Helm uttered, "Kick away, old fellow! My turn next! I'll be in hell with you in a minute!" Tom O. Folliard was orphaned only when he was 14 years old. After his parents died in smallpox, he came to Fort Summer just to pursue his idol Billy the Kid. He wanted to see him in person and, of course, become a member of his gang, the Regulators. When he met Kid for the first time, he tried joining, yet he was rejected. But eventually, he was welcomed into the gang. Tom soon became a good gunslinger. Then, after some time, became one of Billy's closest and trusted friends. However, an incident happened when their gang tried to make their escape while being pursued by Garrett's posse. Tom was left and was shot by Garrett. Just a few moments before he died, Tom said, "Oh my God, is it possible I must die? The sooner, the better. I will be out of pain." Crawford Goldsby, aka Cherokee Bill, was definitely a deadly outlaw, notoriously known for killing 8 men, which the first one happened when he was only 12. During his teens, he became deeply involved with the Cook Gang and started his rough and tumble life as an outlaw. These fellows mainly operated at the Indian Territory, where their infamy spread unhindered. From banks, stores, and trains, regardless of what establishments, they did all sorts of robberies for more than 2 years. Definitely, with extreme luck, they often managed to slip away from the authorities and even successfully evaded posses. However, it's quite a bit odd and incomprehensible that Cherokee Bill tried robbing a train alone. It was that time that one of his former gang members led the authorities to his arrest in exchange for a lighter sentence and bounty money. Eventually, he was then sentenced to be hanged in front of hundreds of people. Just before his last moments, an official asked him of his last few words, if he happened to have one. Well, while seemingly unconcerned, Cherokee Bill then hastily replied, "I came here to die, not to make a speech." You have just discovered the amazing witty last words from Old West Outlaws. So click this and discover another amazing Old West wisdom that might help you even today.